Well, it's Monday afternoon, start of a new week, and thought I'd just come and show you what I'm breaking myself in gently with this week. Well, as you can see, I started out with just doing the couple of sketchbook spreads. I had remnants in this palette from the colour mixing that I started doing last week, and I just thought, well, I'll use those up. There was a couple of sort of combinations that I quite liked, but yeah, so this one has just watercolour on it. There's no acrylic ink in there. Obviously this has got some acrylic ink with some granulation fluid in it. Quite liking the palette. This really soft, muted grey, almost with a hint of sort of purple. I think there was some moon glow in there, which, if you know the Daniel Smith moon glow, it does sort of granulate. So I think there is a sort of slight hint in there, and I think there might possibly be some Payne's grey. Quite like this sort of colour combination. Again, I like the acrylic, sepia acrylic with the granulation fluid in it, because it gives that impression to me, at any rate, of the mud flats. And you know how when it gets baked hard, it gets cracked and there's little rivulets and marks in it. That's what that suggests to me. That was one of the sheets of colour mixing that I did. I've pinned the other one up because there was the colours on there that I quite liked. And I did some separate swatches, and I've just been sort of trialling these out, if you like. I have to say, I think this is sort of a favourite palette. That's the cobalt turquoise from Wallace Seymour. That is literally it, just sort of neat. And then that is obviously put at this end and then sort of gradated down with water. And I do like the way that it goes. This is the same cobalt Tiger's Eye Genuine. That's a Daniel Smith colour, and I really love this because the Tiger's Eye, both shades granulate, so they have this lovely sort of mix to it. Again, this is Indian Yellow and Payne's Grey, and I quite like that as a sort of a dark brown contrast. This was just, I don't know, do you know what? This was, it says on the, is that the one? No. It says on the tube, I don't know whether you'll be able to see that, so that L'Aquarelle, but this is brown pink. Okay. That's more brown pink, there you go. But I quite like that as the contrast. And then this, I don't know, I'll try and turn it towards the light. I don't know really whether you'll be able to catch any glimpse of that. This is Davy's Grey, beginning of the week, get my teeth in. Davy's Grey, Rose Madder, and there's interference gold in there. So there is a sort of a shimmer to it when you get it to the right, in the right light. But I'm quite liking these as a colour palette. Just my muted sort of colour. And then I've got these other, excuse me, possibilities just to throw into the mix. I think this is the turquoise, Davy's Grey and Indian Yellow, sort of just as an alternative. That's Amethyst Genuine, Moon Glow and some Iron Plum. This is the Tiger's Eye, Indian Yellow and a Moonlight, which is a Michael Harding colour. And then this is the Davy's Grey and Indian Yellow. So that was the other ones that I'd sort of picked out of the shades that I'd mixed about with. So I think this is sort of, I think, what's going to be my overall palette, shall we say, and then these ones, I don't know, throw in the mix. And then my only other thought was, I've got some soft pastels in a sort of that green, a bright green. I've got soft pastel somewhere, she says, don't know where it is now, in a yellow ochre, and I've got a pink, although I have sent off for a unison soft red, I think it's called, just to see what that's like. Or a hint of, or a line or something of orange, or a more on the rusty orange side, shall we say, to evoke a sense of the rusted ironmongery that sort of is on the coast, you know, the jetty, the rings tying up the boats, etc, etc. So yeah, I'm sort of feeling a bit happier now. I've got a colour palette that I'm quite happy with. As I say, I'm just waiting for Jackson's order. I did send off for, was it some more Potter's Pink? Because I thought it was a bit, that made quite a nice shade as well, but I was nearly out of that. But yeah, that's my start to the week. I suppose in there I've also got a more toned down green, or I've got, I don't know whether this will do, there's that real sort of dark tealy colour that sort of toned in with that, but it really contrasts lovely with that. Do you ever get those days when you think, do you know what, I really should have just left it? I find I have more energy in the mornings. That's when I tend to get on and do more work. Combination of my rheumatoid and the fact that usually awake by sort of 5 in the morning. Means that by the sort of mid-afternoon my energy levels are flagging slightly. So whatever possessed me to sort of think I could come out here this afternoon and paint something that I thought was worthy, I have no idea. It's only on the Sea White of Brighton 300 GSM cartridge paper, so in that respect nothing really lost. And again, I think some of the problem now is that I've decided on a colour palette, and that's great. But then on the other hand, I'm still trying to use up what's in the palette. I think my first task tomorrow should be to absolutely have a good old clean out of my palette with the white oil pastels, put some watermarks down, and it all went downhill from there. The more I fiddled, the more I faffed, the more I disliked it. So the more I fiddled and faffed until I just thought, what on earth? We'll just throw everything at it, and there you go, that's the result. What can I say? A mishmash of daubs and splatters and I don't know. But I try to reframe this in my head as well. It's not lost, is it? Because, you know, throughout this process you've now come to the conclusion that, you know, you've decided on a palette, so why are you not using it? Why are you still trying to use up these dregs? So I have learnt that, you know what, I really think from now on I ought to, as I say, have a good clean out of my palette and start fresh. The other thing with this is I'm going to let this totally dry. It's still a bit damp, and then I've got a couple of small mounts. And whilst I'm not saying that this, you know, is going to be worthy, shall we say, worthy of mounting, worthy of, but I might find a composition in here that I like, or some marks, or I don't know, there might just be something in here that I think, oh, that's not too bad, I quite like that as a composition, or a mark. So that's, I always like to leave the studio, whatever the session has been like, whether it's been a productive session or, as is the case here, a not so productive session, I still try to leave the studio on a positive and with a plan of action for the next time I'm in here. So my plan of action the next time I'm in here is to give my palettes a really good clean out, to have a look at this, see if there's anything I like, because you see, there was this other one that I did, a bit in the same vein as this really. I was just going for it and I didn't like the whole thing. But then when I left it to dry and came back to it and cropped it, I thought, oh, do you know what? Again, not saying that this is what I would class as a finished piece, worthy, you know, of framing and putting in an exhibition. But it's a different composition for me, which I quite liked and thought I might like to explore. You know, there's less sky, there's more ground. There's less white space there. I think one of my intentions, I've sort of slowly working my way into these, but I think one of my intentions is that with my studio time, it is to be a little more intentional, to have some sort of focus, fixed sort of focus, rather than just this overarching need to produce work for the exhibition. There's got to be sort of a little highlights along the way, like exploring the colour palette, exploring the compositions, finding the best ways that I can in my head to represent what I'm trying to capture on the paper. And to do that, I'd like to go away, as I say, and leave the session having thought, well, I've learned something today and I've also got my plan of action, or at least something that gets me going in the studio the following day or the next time I'm in the studio. It's not a case of I walk into the studio and think, oh, well, what am I going to do now? So as I say, not a total waste of time. And who knows, by the time this is dry tomorrow or whenever, and I've sort of looked at it, I might think, oh, quite like that. So we shall see. And I shall look forward to showing you my sparkly, or as near as sparkly, because I'm not quite sure I'll be able to get some of these palettes clean, because some of them in there are acrylic ink and yeah. Morning, another day, another session in the studio. Set the timer for an hour at the moment. I'm doing it in hour blocks. See how we get on. Moved on from the half-hour blocks. Anyway, and I thought I'd just come in and show you what I've been doing for almost an hour now. If the buzzer goes off, apologies, but I'll see about having a slurp of my coffee and then turning you around. Right, came in, oh, excuse me. First off, thought I'll just use a few more of the little dregs out of my palette. So I've just done these. As you can see, the colours are now getting particularly muddy. This one got very muddy. Not so keen on it, obviously. But with this one, obviously the colours are quite muted, quite pale, but I don't mind it. It probably just wants a sort of a line or two just to highlight it through here, just to give it a bit of oomph. But, you know, I don't mind. First splashes around in the studio. And then I've spent, well, it must be nearly the whole of the hour, actually. You know, so I was going to clean my palettes because, as I say, the colour's beginning to get a bit muddy. This one, because I think the last couple of days was the first time I'd used it, so this one was relatively easy to get clean. I know you can still see the remnants of the colours in the palette, but it's a lot cleaner than what it used to be, and it will do for some mixing. I think I might have another new one of these somewhere that will do for when I want to be working on the paintings for the exhibition. But this one, I've just cleaned it up. To be quite honest, the amount of time and the length and the amount of hot water that it's taken, it probably would have been cheaper just to buy a new. And then the other thing I said I was going to do today was the one that I started yesterday that I really hated. I said I was going to let it dry and then see if there was any areas of it that I liked. Not as finished pieces or, you know, frameable pieces even, but just possibilities. So I had a couple of mounts and I sort of waved them all over and tried to pick out areas that, I don't know, spoke to me in some way. And this little square composition, I think it needed, you know, I'm not totally happy with it, but as a composition, it sort of, I think, helps in drawing the eye around the image, you know, this sort of sweep along here, down the wooden poles and then across to this bit here, I think creates a nice, you know, guides your eye around the composition. This is a bit clumpy for me there, but And then the other one that I quite like was this one. Again, not perfect, but I quite like the way it sort of draws you down. I think there perhaps ought to have been a bit more differentiation here or something here other than just, I don't know. But I quite like this composition. There's the hints of something, suggestions. That could be a hint of a reed. Again, the wooden poles. Again, it perhaps just needs a highlight of something just to lift it a bit. But like I said yesterday, totally didn't like the overall piece. Reframing it, trying to use it as a positive, and I've got these pieces out of it that give me information about other possible compositions, like in the colour palette. But as I said, I think it probably just needs something as a bit of a contrast, as a flash of something. But yeah, so it wasn't a total waste of time. So yeah, that's as far as I've got this morning. I also had a bit of a rummage across in my old studio, and I came across, I know these will be back to front, Daler Rowney mixed media art boards. And it does say you can use them for acrylics or watercolour, pastels, and I think I might have to do it. I thought you'd just be able to pull them off, but I think I might just have to trim that one off. But yeah, they're quite thick boards. What's it say? They're 8 by 11 inches, 1.4 mil deep boards. So I thought I might have a go. I don't know. I'm doing something on here. I'm waiting for a Jackson's order that's got 1 or 2 bits in that I would really quite like to get going. But in the meantime, I thought I'd have a go on one of these. So I'll let you know how we get on. Probably would be better with a scalpel, but to be honest, it's in the other studio and it's just started raining, so yeah, you'd have thought they'd have just really pulled off, or else I'm just doing it wrong. Possibly it's me. I mean, I have been known to what's my other half say, operator error. This is a workout in itself. And somebody's going to come on here, aren't they, and tell me, do you know what, there's a really simple way of doing it. Which I'm sure there is. And which by the time I get to the last one, I will probably have discovered. Anyway, I think that's worn me out enough with that now. Right, here's the 2 boards that I've wrestled off the pad. I've just done some random white oil pastel marks over them. I've got my palette here. I just thought I'm going to use this one for the time being, and then I'll try and wash it after every session. Turquoise, tiger's eye, Indian yellow. What's that? That's Payne's grey, and then some of that brown pink. That big brush. What was you thinking, Karen, that you're going to be able to use that big brush? In this little mixing palette, I have no idea. Right, so this is just the cobalt turquoise. Can I get that's mixed in with a bit of the tiger's eye. I'm trying in my head to imagine that these are my sketchbook pages. Can but try. Just need a squirt. The only thing about this palette is that the wells for the colour are not that great and are not that big. And I do quite like to squeeze, you know, a reasonable amount out. I think I need to work on the shape, shall we say, of some of the white oil pastel marks that I put down, because sometimes I don't like, I think if I'm trying to think of clouds or something, they're sometimes too angled. Stop and turn you around and then just show you these two colours, because I've got a hair on there, but never mind. Anyway, I'll just stop. This is only the Wallis Seymour. It's the Cobalt Turquoise Light Deep Lustre and the Daniel Smith Tiger's Eye Genuine. Just these two colours. A, I love the colour it produces, and B, you get some fantastic effects. And I've not put any granulation fluid at all in this. It is just the white oil pastel and those two colours. And I don't know if I go over here. Ooh, I don't know whether you'll be able to see the granulation in there as well from the Cobalt Turquoise. Like I say, that is simply those two colours and the white oil pastel. It just shows you though, look, and I don't know, because these boards, just putting that water on, they have sort of, as you can see, slightly bowed with the amount of fluid I've put on. So anyway, we'll carry on, see how we get on. Right, that came out more than I was hoping. I have to say, now I've done that, I don't really like it, but you know, we'll see if we can dissipate it slightly with the old granulation fluid. Just see. That's a bit better now, it's not quite so just a big clump of brown. Again, I want to add something in here on this one, but again, I think if I go in at the moment, because as you can see, there is quite a lot of water on there. And this is a lot of what I do. There's a lot of doing work, studying about, looking at it, like most artists, I'm assuming. The boards might be, obviously, from the very definition of being a board, they're more robust than the paper, but not so easy to manipulate. I'm just going to leave them at the time being. I think, have a think about what I think they need. I think it would be easy to tip the water off if this was some sort of old towel underneath, rather than to try and move it to the slot bucket, as I call it. So I think I'm just going to leave these, and meanwhile I'm going to have a bit of a tidy up and rethink about how I'm laying out my workspace.